Doug Burke from Ohio to tell us about FlyOhio.
All right, so my coworkers joke that I can take one slide and make it last an hour. I've got 75 of them. Let's try to get through this. Ohio was asked, we do have a pretty good FlyOhio UAV program, and we were asked to see if we could put a presentation on. This is not my presentation. This is actually David Geiger, who is the Deputy Director of FlyOhio and manages our whole operations of all of our UAVs that we run across the state. He's run through it with me, pretty much understand most of it. So we'll just go ahead and go through it, and I'll give some explanations of what we're doing. I put his information at the end so that if there are questions that I can't answer, you'll have your contacts, or you can pass it on to who needs to be. FlyOhio is our unmanned aerial vehicle department, our office. It's under our Drive Ohio, and Drive Ohio was an organization that was put together in Ohio to kind of facilitate anything coming into Ohio where new innovations come into Ohio, and the problem is sometimes they have to go to the Department of Agriculture, sometimes to ODOT, sometimes to all these different places, and it can get bogged down and really stalled out trying to make its way through every organization that needs to be. Drive Ohio was initiated to consolidate that and be a one-point place that a company or an idea goes to, and then they do the legwork to combine everything and get it done. Unmanned aerial falls under that, and as a result, unmanned air or UAV group goes out and actually works for a lot of these other departments. Even though they're under ODOT, they do work for all the different organizations that you see listed up here. Two reasons that unmanned aerial: one, it's efficient, and two, it's safety wise. That's the two things they look at. The efficiency level is we have a small item, a small aerial device that can go out and do a multitude of different things that I'll show you later in the slides, and do it cheaply, a lot cheaper than what you can send out a whole crew with, bring a helicopter out, bring an airplane, anything like that. The other things increase safety. You see a picture of these guys that are scaling that bridge, and there I'll show you a photo later where they had to, the option was scaling a bridge to look at something or just fly a drone up and seeing it, and how much difference that makes. Just an example, as we're ramping up, 2019 we had about 300 flights, a little over 300. We're now up to about 721. They project they'll be about the same for 22. So these are all times that we're going out and logging flights for either ODOT, and you can see the different colors are different organizations that we're flying for that are inside of ODOT. But it's ramped up. They probably say that this will be about a steady amount of what we're probably doing yearly now is what you saw in 21. So a couple things that happened going on in this slide. The biggest thing is right here. So before that, you could not fly a drone unless you got pre-approval from FAA. And that really tied a lot of hands. After that, with the implementation of 107, it allowed us to actually train and have operators that were trained to be able to fly the drones themselves. And that's what really opened up ODOT in Ohio to be able to put drones out there and do a multitude of different things. A couple of the different aircraft that we run. So this one is basically our highway use. We can send that up. It can sit up there for a good amount of time. It can take a lot of videos of the traffic going on and really feed back a lot of information. These are our heavy lifters right here. These are things that we mount equipment to. Might be a magnetometer, might be a radar, a radioactivity sensor, Geiger counter, maybe a ground penetrating radar, and we'll show you how we have all those mounted to it before. A few of the others, this one is just more for our bridge crew. When our bridge crew's out doing inspections, we can fly that up. It's a little easier to fly. Forward-facing camera, our bridge crew is starting to use those for inspections. This is a little hurdle that's coming at us. So starting in the next couple years, we are being federal requirements, everything are looking at going to Buy America. I guess the technology, having these up, doing a lot of video, they want to be able to say that all that stuff is kept and built inside of the United States, security reasons, support of the U.S. So we're actually transitioning over to these type of UAVs that are all American built and go away from any foreign built. As I said, when 107 came out, what it did was it gave us the ability to start to train our own staff. So we have what's called LTAP, is our local technical training program, and we can train out to different municipalities, but we can also train inside of ODOT. So this opened the avenue, and you can see right now that we've got 5 bridge inspectors, surveyors, engineers, communication, and we've been able to bring all these guys and train all these guys, so now that we can supply them a drone. And what we do is we assign them a drone. They have that drone in their inventory. They are able to fly now, and they can use that towards their inspections of whatever they're doing, depending on their position. This was big. This is what changed when that 107 came out. What are some of the things we do? We get called out regularly for construction items. This is just us flying through and looking at historically, showing different shots of construction as it progresses. So you're looking through this different construction, and what it is it looks like they're putting in a reversing diamond is what it looks like going in there. And they just took periodic pictures from the same location to give an update on where that construction is. Another example is just a road widening construction they're doing on that. A lot of it is just come in and show what they could do. And there's just showing the video that goes along with it. The other thing they do is they'll come into bridge construction or big project construction, because sometimes the only way you can get a really good representation of how the construction's going along and documented is from the air. It's a lot easier than trying to bring one of our planes out or one of our helicopters, so we can slip in with a drone, come up, do a complete shot of it, and they get a good idea from the air of what's going on construction and how far along it is. And these are just different areas in Ohio that they've pulled out to and done shots. Attorney General, we reached out to them because it was land acquisition, and this is a video, but it's actually thousands of pictures that they take, and then they have a program that stitches them together. So when you see it, it's a flyby. It actually becomes three-dimensional, so they can actually look at it in a 3-dimensional view. But these are individual pictures that the program stitches together that the drone supplies them. And then what the Attorney General was doing was using that for the purchase of the land to go back and determine what they needed and what they were looking at. It's just a flyby of a pavement. This is a pavement design they did and a construction they did, and just to show just for visual representation of what's going on it. They've taken anything out but just the pavement to show the job. Now, one of the restrictions with UAVs is they're supposed to be line of sight. So you have to be in visual range of your UAV when you're flying it, which causes some constraints. Somebody would have to be following along to be able to see. And I'll show you an example where we had an exemption for that. This is downtown Columbus. This is another, considering this is a big high profile tear up, this is our split of 71 and 70, and they're revamping it. They're widening it. They're actually doing major lane changes. This is stuff that we go out routinely and get pictures so we can at least put it up and update to the public so they see what's going on and that we're progressing on it, because this stuff's taking years. So for us to be able to get as much information out to the public and see that we are moving forward, it does benefit us. So they just slipped in and did an aerial. District 5 had a washout. So heavy storms came through in a construction, washed this whole area out. They asked if one of the UAVs could come in. They actually flew this. They did a analysis to determine how much material had washed out and whether or not it was salvageable or not. So from the quick response in the video, they were able to determine there's enough material there that they could continue on with construction. They didn't have to haul more in. Construction designs, road widening. I'll flip through a few of these. This one, they came in, they wanted to see, this is he called it a rubberizer. I think he meant rubbleizer, in my opinion, but I wasn't going to change it on him. But just an example where they come in and they could see an aerial of it just taking up in the concrete before they removed it. We pull them out for lane changes, and what we start to get into coming forward is we're using it now to look at traffic while it's happening, so we can come out, deploy it during a traffic situation, and then make determinations. This is 670 in Columbus, where we went to a smart lane and we turn it on and off. They can fly that out there then and see how traffic is responding to these lanes turning on and off. A new design we came into I never even knew of, and maybe you guys have seen it, is we have a semi-truck turnaround, and this was another deal where they watched it, they put a drone up and they watched semis, and what semis were trying to do were pull out onto this lane right here and make a left-hand turn, but the problem is they had too much of high traffic both ways. So we've actually built in a right-hand turn that comes down, and then we flare out a big turnaround for that semi and stretch it out to the right and allow them to pull back and do a U-turn basically. That keeps that semi from trying to cross 2 lanes at one time. Now they only do it one at a time. They were able to come out, film that, watch it going on, and then film the results of it. Lane closures and shifts. These are a couple scenarios where we've taken drones out. We've taken a drone out to a situation like this that has 3 stoplights. You got a stoplight here, here, and here, and they were always running into traffic jams. They actually flew a drone up for a period of time and watched those traffic patterns, and they were able to see how traffic was condensing at all of those different locations at one time, and then make their determinations of what needed to change. And what it wound up doing was changing the lighting pattern at those to adjust for that. But it was one of those things on the ground, you never saw it by them bringing a drone up and shooting it real quick and shooting for, you know, they can go up. They have some that are actually gas powered and they can stay up for hours now and film. And that's what they're benefiting from it. Same thing happened here in Springboro. They had a huge area where they were having traffic problems, and it was a 20-minute drive to cut through these areas. So they went up, they filmed it, they looked at traffic patterns on all the different areas. They actually had 6 drones running at one time, watching all the hot spots, and then they consolidated all that data. And what they were able to do was come in and make determinations of how things should change through that whole intersection. And it doesn't sound like a lot. They basically shaved about 4 minutes off a person's commute going through. But for a 20-minute commute, that was 20% is what they reduced in amount of time. So it made the people happy that they were looking at it and they made changes, but this was only able to be done with them sitting there with 6 drones up, coordinating all that. So they had to have 6 operators out there running in a drone independently. FEMA calls out. There was a huge vaccination program going on up in Cleveland. There was also an NFL game going. So with FEMA involved, they actually flew the drones up to try to look at crowd control, try to see how things were going. That information then was fed right back to FEMA. So they use it on that side to investigate crowd control. Special events, this is a Black Friday. They got called out because they historically have a huge problem with people parking on our interstates because they can't find a parking space in the shopping mall. So they'll jump the fence and leave their car sitting on the side of 71. They actually bring those in then to monitor and watch that while it's going on to kind of keep an eye on it. Another special event, this is our state fair. And as you can see right here, this is 71 in downtown that's backed up because of our state fair. Traffic monitoring where they come in and they can then get the word back. And this is a Christmas light because of COVID. There you can see the Christmas lights. They flew in because of COVID, they made it an in-car only. And what it did was it created this traffic jam down through here. And it was not projected, it wasn't expected, but they quickly were able to respond to it and then start to get information back of how we can handle it. This one's kind of cool, traffic monitoring. So what this does is this actually counts cars. And it can make a determination if it's a semi with a trailer, and then what you see up in the upper left-hand corner, it actually counts the cars, it counts the semis, it actually looks at a double or a triple and documents, and then it keeps a traffic count. Instead of going out with one of the air sensors that tracks a wheel hit, this will actually recognize sedans versus dump trucks and record those. So this is something else they're using on traffic count studies. One of the things we've come up with is they call it a Milestone Box. What it is, it's a recorder that takes all the data that comes off of these drones. When they're up sitting in these hotspot areas, it takes that data, pulls it down to the box, and then it transfers that box over to our OGO, which is our website that shows all of our traffic situations. And it implements it in, so we have all these stationary cameras that are out on bridges, intersections, anything like that. We can actually bring a UAV camera now into that feed and put it out on that. And if we have one temporary up somewhere, it can show that picture. So as you can see, there's all the traffic patterns. One of these is actually a UAV feeding in through that box, and then it goes right into our network and gets sent back out to the public to see. So we can portably put up viewing stations for the public. Anybody remember hearing about our bridge that caught on fire and Cincinnati, had a semi go through it that had hazardous materials, jackknifed in the middle of our bridge. It was probably one of our highest volume bridges from Cincinnati to Kentucky. Took out the understructure. It was a double-decker bridge. It crashed on the bottom. So immediately our drones went down. We're able to fly up through the superstructure, do analysis of what the problems were, what the issues were, whether or not the steel was sound. But then while they were down there, they were also able to fly up here and see the whole traffic pattern and start to make determinations of how they need to route people around this traffic. So it gave a lot faster response time. And that was looking at the mobility of them being able to pull out and get into those areas. No, I don't. I read that and I was like, he's on vacation this week because I was going to ask. Those bridges, so every bridge basically, but I think 2 are owned by Kentucky. Since Kentucky owns the river, they own 90% of the river is what it is. It's where the low water mark is. Everything really falls under theirs. And this has been, I'm sure you're aware of it, this has been a headache because this bridge is getting replaced and it's going to be $6 billion to replace this bridge. So that's where we're going to put it right next to it. It's Kentucky and us, we're going to put it right next to it. So that's where it's going in. Don't know what the ban is. So if you know, natural disasters, we also get called out by our National Guard for natural disasters, where we have collapses, tornadoes. You see this one, this is a tornado that went through. National Guard has asked us to come in, document it, so we can come in and we can fly that lane and see where that tornado went and get a good documentation of that situation. Flooding. This is Grand Lake St. Mary's. This is where I grew up. That's our little island out there. This is on our west side, but this is historic flooding. They brought them in. They probably were in for our magnetometer study, but they went out and they were able to fly over the whole flood scene and document it. Landslides, down on our southeast side, we have a lot of landslides. Here's another safety issue where in times, and I'll show you this next picture, you can see that there is a collapse right there going on while they're up there filming it. So historically, we would have to send a crew in that would have to climb up and investigate what looked like anything loose or unstable. And that puts them, as you can see, that going on, the landslide going on there. This allows us to fly up there easily, get a good high-resolution shot, and determine whether or not we need to send anybody up into that situation, or we can make our determinations from there. This is where we get into our bridge inspection. So we have 2 snoopers. Our snoopers run $750,000 a piece. We do every 10 years, we do a refurb on them, and that costs about $400,000. The idea is we're starting to transition. If we don't have to have hands on the bridge where we have to touch the bridge and we're just going in and doing inspections, we're now starting to bring drones in. Our bridge guys are being inspected in it. Our actual crew can come out and do inspections. And what they're looking at is when we run a snooper and we run all the support behind the snooper, the travel out, the chase vehicles, the amount of people that have to do it, they're saying it costs us about $3,100 for a day, where our drone is coming out with their crew and their travel and doing it for about $500 a day. So that's one of the big sells for where we're switching over when we can. With the bridge inspection, we're able to come in. They're looking at the whole bridge, the bridge as a whole. They're looking at any type of undercutting for the water that will go down. They can fly down in there where normally we have to bring a boat out and do any type of inspections. Now they can fly in to do that. They can look at any of the understructure. They can look at any of the steel. They have versatility to fly all through that. We have a bridge that's a compressed concrete. They actually have a drone that can fly down the inside of it, and it just flies down and then does a whole inspection of it as it goes through. This is the one I was talking about. This is one of our bridges, and I think this is one we own on the Ohio River. But what they're looking at here is this crack that you see right there, and it was repaired, and they were asked to go back and look at it again. Now, if this is at about 400 feet, we would require an operator to rappel and climb up to that, where we took the drone up and were able to do a visual inspection and determine that it was okay. But that's our solution, so it keeps us from having to climb that bridge. The other one, delamination. Now, I'm a mechanical engineer. This is kind of civil engineer, but I slept at a Holiday Inn Express, so I think I know what's going on here. What they're looking at right here is that lighter purple line. And so we're going in with one of our infrared cameras on that drone. And when we photograph it, what we're seeing is moisture is getting into this crack here and allowing this bottom part to stay cooler. And that means that we've got an issue with that concrete starting to separate down there. So we're going in now and actually hitting them with infrared to see, look at the temperature, see what's going on, and make a determination of whether we have an issue there. So that's kind of new to us. I think the old school was you go up with a bucket and a hammer and you smack on it a little and see what kind of spalling you get off of it. Survey projects. We're now getting into survey projects where we can go out with the drone, we can survey a site, we can set the pinpoint locations all the way through the whole project you want to do, and that drone will fly from site to site to site and take a survey reading of it. This is an example of it. This is another example, and here's one more. This picture I just showed you was District 5. They did their first project where they never sent a survey crew out. Everything was done through the drone. And again, while I slept at a Holiday Inn Express, I don't have a clue what they mean by this, but the understanding is the average DZ, which is 0.036, anything better than 0.07 is considered accurate enough for survey work. So they're using these drones now, and the advantage to this is that drone went out and hit all those locations in a matter of minutes, where a surveyor would have to go to every location with his handheld and do it. So it's dramatically cutting the amount of time and making those projects a lot more affordable. So that's a big thing that they're moving forward on. This is Lidar. So we mount a Lidar under our drones. And what happened was we used to have an ammunition plant right about here. And they had this, and this is World War I, we had an ammunition plant. And we had this canal that was dug to run the power unit that ran the ammunition plant. And we were getting ready to do work there, and they wanted to know where all that was, so they were able to sweep right through with a drone with Lidar on it and determine where that old canal was and where that ammunition plant was before they went drilling. Same thing here, we've got a bat cave, we've got an old mine, and what they were looking at is we have the Indiana browns. Indiana browns are endangered species. It keeps us from doing certain work on trees. They were able to fly in, you can see where the cave is right here. And what they're doing is they're looking at different types of vegetation to determine what that bat likes, what that bat may roost in, and kind of feed that information back for ODNR or for our purposes when we're cleaning up. So they're stretching out the ODNR on this stuff, which is our Department of Natural Resources. Ground penetrating radar, what they're doing is they're flying a field here. They're actually looking for a culvert out there that they don't know where it is, and they determined the culvert was right here by using ground penetrating radar. So they can come in. Some of these drones have to fly a matter of 2 feet, 3 feet off the ground so that they can do that, and that's where they can come in and do what a helicopter wouldn't necessarily be able to do. This was just a sample where they had an emergency. They had one of our 100-foot light poles. And the operator called and said, we can't get the light. They're all remote control. They can lower them. Couldn't get the light to come down. Called the crew out. The crew flew right up to it and determined that this wire was wrapped around the retractor that allowed it to come down. So they knew what the fix had to be done when they got up there, but they also determined that it wasn't a 100-foot light pole. It was only like 94 feet. And we actually had a lift that could reach that. When it was 100 foot, we were going to have to go out and rent a lift and make a determination of what we needed that was not inside of ODOT. But by the drone figuring out that it was less than that, it was only about 94 feet, we knew we had one that could actually reach it. So it saved us from making a rental purchase. So it actually was twofold. Another kind of an interesting one that they brought in. Apparently this light pole here kills these soybeans because it's on all the time. So apparently soybeans need a little rest like we do. So what was happening was there was a lawsuit, and they were going out and checking with infrared to see, and I think it's this spot right here where this light's on all night long, and it was actually affecting the development of the soybeans in the farmer's field. So for documentation purposes, we went out and did an analysis to see how it played out in the field, and my understanding is the darker is actually good leaf growth, and your lighter area is an issue. I won't go through this whole thing. This is just, we're using it for training purposes also. We've got a lot of roundabouts. Obviously, some people don't really understand the roundabouts yet. So we, for our website, have used the aerial device to come in and do pretty good training videos on how to use a roundabout. Some of it's integrated with the drone, some of it's actually driving through it. But if you get farther along, which I don't know if I can fast forward through, it actually shows the cars highlighted from the drone that show as it travels through. So it's really nothing more than a training purpose. Salt barns. So we've actually come up with a calculation where we'll fly inside and actually look at a salt barn pile and use those calculations from the pictures to give a documentation of how much salt is in that barn. It's just one of the little projects they were working on as a sample. Department of Agriculture, all of our roller coasters in Ohio, which we have 2 major parks, which is Cedar Point and Kings Island, those all fall under the Department of Agriculture for safety. So what they will do now is they'll come out on a repair on a roller coaster or any type of equipment and do all the shots with the drones to see if the repairs are sound, see if it picks anything up. So you're seeing they're shooting it in regular conventional, they're shooting it in infrared, and then they're showing repairs that are through it, and they can fly right up under the superstructure and see that. Another situation where we would have to have somebody out there climbing on that, and now we just run up there with the drone and do it. This was a huge trash site. It was basically when they tear down a home, so it's all the construction waste, and this vendor had this, and he went out of business and closed his doors and walked off. And so we were left with the pile to clean up. So EPA asked us to actually come in, do an analysis of it, and make a determination of the volumetric size of what's there so they knew how to handle it, and then get them a good video of it so they knew what they were looking at. Same thing, this is your, it's BLOS, is beyond line of sight. So as I said earlier, with a drone, you're not supposed to fly it farther than you can see. That's a rule, that's a law. However, what we had was we had a chemical spill, went into this river. EPA asked us to immediately come out and fly that river to see if we could see any of the spillage and what it might have done to the river. So they got a special waiver where they were able to fly this whole river, and they would not know where the drone was. They're literally flying it by what they're seeing on their camera. But they were able to fly through this drone and then make a determination of what impact that spill had on the river. So this is not the norm to be able to just go do this. They had to get that quickly permitted. So magnetometers. So we're now for ODNR. Ohio was a big hot spot for wells. They came Pennsylvania. When they ran out in Pennsylvania, they worked their way to us. They worked their way right through the state. Now the problem is we have them all over the place from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and EPA, ODNR, we're all trying to go figure out where they are. So these drones are mounting them with magnetometers, and they're going out and they're looking at hot spots anywhere they hit metal. Again, this is my home lake, Grand Lake St. Mary's, where I grew up. This is 1880s. When that was back then, there were oil wells all over Grand Lake. And if you watch any of the specials, this is actually the first place in the world that offshore oil drilling was done, was Grand Lake St. Mary's. So we have that little feather in our cap. There is one rock pile still out there that I used to sail out to when I was a kid, that's left over from it, but most of it are gone. And you can see how many wellheads were out there. So what they did is ODNR asked them to come out and fly the lake. And what they did was they went and they flew up and down through that lake. They run a gas-powered drone that can run for hours. And they just went back and forth across the lake, and every one of these is a hot spot where there is a known well, or a casing underwater that ODNR now has to watch for because of potential leaking later. They did the same thing for this Spencerville just north of Grand Lake. They were asked to go out and look for 3 spots, 3 wellheads they knew that were out there to see if it would really work. And when they flew out there, they actually found all of these well heads in one little land plot. The interesting thing enough is you've got a couple of them that are actually sitting under houses. So they built the house right over the well casing and didn't know it was there. But the magnetometer still was able to pick it up. So they're actually running, they were just doing the Grand Lake work about a couple months ago, and they're still pulling that data and supplying it to our Department of Natural Resources. We also have Geiger counter, radiation detection. So we have 2 nuclear power plants in Ohio. Both of them are up on the lake. There's concerns that if we ever had any type of a situation up there that could be a possible radiation leak, if we ever have a dirty bomb that gets set off, they want a safe way that we can bring a drone in and determine the level of intensity that the radioactivity is there. And to test this, we had a semi, so somewhere on the east side of the U.S. was bringing through a shipment, and you can see it boxed right here, of depleted uranium that was going out to, I think it's Colorado now, where they're storing them. So we flew a drone up, and what you can see is as that truck passes by, no radiation, no radiation, then all of a sudden you see yellow and orange right there where the box is, and then it goes back to no radiation. So this was a test to see how well that detector could see it. And it's obviously, even though it's encased and protected, it was still putting out enough, letting it get through that we could see it on our scope. We have this on hand if we ever need it to pull out. And this is just an example. We have a Calamityville, which is a site that we set up. There's some of it we share with Indiana. And this is a site where they're showing that they had placed a radioactive hotspot to see if that drone could pick it up. And you can see it's zeroing in on it right here. So that's where we practice. Crash reconstruction, we can get out pretty quick. So in certain situations, we've been called out to do a aerial shot of a big crash, something like that, and get documentation on it so that we have it for later. Cleveland Metro Parks, we have a huge honeysuckle problem. Honeysuckle's invasive species. The thing we found out is honeysuckle is one of the last plants to lose its leaves in the winter or in the fall. So we wait till that period, we can fly up, and then we can do an infrared scan and pick up all the vegetation that's out there and get a determination of how much that honeysuckle has moved into that area. That's just an example where they were doing this for ODNR. So the last thing that we do is everybody's trained in this 107, they're certified in it. These are steps that we go through before we fly any flight. So we have to go through this program. It tracks, it asks what equipment we're using, what's the situation we're using. It actually goes through a check sheet to make sure that everything you're doing is set right. Anything that kicks back a no might kick that whole flight plan out. But it's just a process that every single flight we do, we go through this and set it up to make sure that what we're doing is right, what we're doing is sound and safe, and we're not basically putting ourselves in any type of situation. So it's just a process they have, a program they have that they run through. And that's all I have for this. Like I said, Dave Gallagher, he's our representative for it. We had a little show here in Springfield. That is a UAV that is actually able to transport a person. So we had a fly in, and they had those all on display, and that was an example of it. Anybody have any questions?
Sounds like y'all are doing UAV work for several different state agencies. Are there other state agencies in Ohio that actually have a drone program?
No, I think right now you might have small law enforcements that have drones, but from the organization for the state, I think the Drive Ohio and or FlyOhio part of Drive Ohio pretty much operates all of those. Yes, and I didn't cover that. The small bridge inspection crews, cost is a big thing on this. I mean, the small bridge inspection, they're about $2,500 a piece. Those heavy lifters that are carrying the magnetometers and stuff, they're about $50,000. So it's one of those things also where we need to make sure you're trained up before they just hand you the keys.
Doug, does your fleet office have a role at all in the purchase and the maintenance, or?
No, they're standalone. They do everything their own. They actually have a maintenance program similar to us, and what they'll do is they'll hand that drone out to if they've gone through the 107 and they're trained, they'll get assigned a drone, kind of like we assign a car. And when that drone actually hits mileage or hours, they'll determine it has to come in for a certain level of maintenance, and they will bring that drone back in and then hand him a different drone that'll go back out, and then they'll do the maintenance on it. That's all housed inside. And I think the biggest reason is they're all pilots, and it's all to them. It's a little different. You know, it's like us. We know dump trucks. They don't necessarily know dump trucks. They know their drones. Our airport operates the same way. The planes that are up there are really on their own programs and on their own maintenances.
You're not budgeting for, you're not purchasing, you're not doing any of those things.
No.
Thanks, Doug. Did anybody take a ride in that unmanned aerial drone?
Oh, I'm sure that we weren't over there for it.
Okay.
It was one, but yeah, I'm sure they took rides in it because They had quite a few different pieces of equipment out there.
Doug, are you providing any support vehicles for the drone program, like any specialty vans or anything like that?
We supply the support vehicles. It's nothing that, I mean, what are we running, a couple Durangos? Yeah, I mean, there's nothing special to it. They just need the storage to be able to put it in the back. So they're probably running Durangos that have the capacity to put it in the back and then haul the people around.
Hey, Doug, it's Mike from Virginia. I think this is a great idea. Did you guys get this just from the military, or was there another DOT that maybe not represented here that came up with that idea? How was this concept kind of?
I think it really drove out of the, like I said, Drive Ohio was put in place to streamline this stuff. And we have our own group of pilots that would fly for our heavy, I guess I would call our heavy equipment or heavy crafts. And it just slowly started to branch off of that. And it really came out of that group and probably our aviation group, is that we could get these things, we could do it. We had our parking lot done. We had, when we were looking at some design work and where to put stuff, we asked them to come in, and they were within, in a couple days they were down, and they flew a grid work up and down our whole complex and then provided us with photos, 3D models, anything we wanted to figure out, like all of our equipment that we buy for building dump trucks, all our beds and everything are stacked. They photographed all of that so we could get a logistics of the area. So, and within a couple days, they were out and photographed it and sent the pictures on to us. So it's a nice operation to have handy.
So I noticed part of that was the surveying and a little bit of estimating as far as the stockpile at the trash site.
Yes.
Have they done any sort of checking or testing where maybe they surveyed something on the ground through more traditional methods and then checked to see their level of accuracy against the drones surveying?
I don't know. I would assume, since they're measuring their error rate, that one little slide that came up and said, here's how much they're off, I would assume that that's where they had gone back and said, here's where we vary from what's actual. But I don't know exactly how they went and did that, whether they surveyed a couple sites and then went and measured it with the drone and saw what the difference was. All I know is when he was talking, he said they're starting to transition over where their accuracy is enough now. From that documentation, their accuracy is enough that they can do a survey without having to have somebody out there with a post and a GPS.
Well, thanks, Doug.
Okay. Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.